Hi everyone, welcome to week 4. This week I've got 2 papers by Torini, and they're the best ones that are currently available for this area. You'll notice that they're based on the New Zealand experience, and there's quite a few similarities between what we do here in Australia and what they do in New Zealand, being fairly close neighbours to us. But the work that Torini has done in the area that we're looking at is quite good, and there's more research that's needed in this area, particularly in the lower end of ECE, where there hasn't been very many studies, but there have been studies on the use of the interactive whiteboard and ICTs in the early school years, so the upper end of ECE is better served than the lower end, but Torini's work actually has looked at the lower end. It's very relevant to what we're doing in visual literacies assignment tasks, so they're very good papers for us to look at. Now, the studies support the use of smart boards in ECE. I haven't seen anything very negative about their use at all. There's a couple of possible disadvantages that I'll speak to you about later, but on the whole there's quite a few things that are positive about their use, and if you've been out at prac and seen them used properly, you'll probably agree that how useful they can be. They've been, in the area of visual art and visual literacy, they've been found to be particularly suited for visual art making through programs such as Kids Pix and Tux Paint, some of the other programs that you've been looking at when you did the posts last week, and the ones that I'll put links to in the subject outline on the website. The different things where they've found to have a lot of advantages are things like supporting that interactive experience that we want them to have. They've been found to provide a much better interactive experience than, say, laptops and other ICTs, because they provide a real hands-on experience. And another thing that they do when we look at the findings from the research is that they tend to encourage group learning, collaborative learning, which we want to encourage, and play-based learning. And they respond well to children's interests, particularly if the teacher carefully selects the sorts of things that they're using on the smart boards. They also assist teachers to model exploration and research skills, so they can show how that happens. Children can be watching. In that case they're not interacting, but they're watching as the teacher models how to do the exploration and the research skills. So they don't have to be used 100% for interaction. There are some other ways that they can be used, but if they're not used mainly for interaction, they can be a little bit of a waste of money. They encourage children to engage in peer tutoring when students have been given the opportunity to take an interactive role with the smart boards. It's found that this natural peer tutoring occurs, and of course we want to encourage that to happen. It's also been found to be attractive to many shy and reluctant learners, so that's another positive thing. Another thing that the research has uncovered, it seems fairly obvious, a lot of these things, but we really need to confirm them. And one important thing is that it provides such an easy way of storing and reviewing student work. Okay, another thing that it does too is it provides a new and different way of creating art. So of course we want to encourage creation of art and learning visual literacy with all the traditional materials, but this just provides another avenue that's quite different, and some things can be done there that can't be done in other ways. I saw a video a few years back of very young children being engaged with a Japanese design program that was to do with 3D modelling, and there's no way that the students could be engaged in real materials and doing the sorts of things that they were doing with this 3D modelling. It was just fantastic to see what very young children could do. It can also be used for developing ideas that are transferred into other mediums, so students can plan on the smart board, talk to other people while they're doing it, and it could be about some sort of a process that they then transfer to something like clay making or painting. So the planning can be done on the smart board and then it's transferred to other mediums. It's also been found to be very attractive to many students with special needs, which is something that we have to be very mindful of and look for ways of engaging students, particularly with special needs, to be able to scaffold their learning and increase motivation. It's also been shown with the interactive whiteboard and the research that's been done that students as young as 2 years old have been able to confidently and competently be engaged with making art on smartboards. So you can really use them well to quite a young age. There's not a lot of disadvantages with interactive whiteboards if they're used properly, but one disadvantage of course can be the cost, because they can be still quite expensive. And that becomes a really big disadvantage if they're not used properly, because people report to me, and I've seen this happen in a lot of sites, that interactive whiteboards are sort of used just like a computer projector. So they're used to show students internet sites and videos. Well, if that's all you're going to do, it only costs a few $100s for a cheap projector. So instead of paying the very high cost of a smartboard, all you would need is a projector to be able to do that. So I'm not saying you shouldn't use it for those purposes, but if you're only using it for those purposes, that would be quite a waste of money. The second paper by the same author speaks a bit more about the interactive whiteboards, because she also includes that in the second paper, but she talks about some of the more general uses of ICT in early childhood settings, and they're things like digital photography as an art form, and how students can record the other types of art that they're making with traditional materials through the use of the digital camera, or they can actually use the digital camera as an art form in itself, because there's a lot of filters and special effects that can be used to create all sorts of interesting digital photographs that are sort of a form of artwork by themselves. Another thing that she speaks about in that paper that's very interesting that I've seen happen really well in ECE settings is the use of digital animation. And one that's quite popular is where students create clay models, so they're using that traditional medium of clay, and they use programs like I Can Animate, which support very young children to be able to create animations, and students see things like cartoons and anime and so on and really love that sort of stuff. So if they can actually do it themselves and create an animation, it links them to what happens in the real world. They can understand that people have made these cartoons, made these animations, and that they can do that as well. So that can lead to a lot of fruitful discussion in the setting with the children. Another thing that ICT can be used for is as a tool for exhibiting children's art, and also for learning about the art of people and the art from other cultures. So as parents could be coming into the ECE centre, and then the ICT could be set up so that slideshow could be shown of children's artwork, or when you're teaching, introducing other cultures and how the art of India is very different to the art of China, could be quite interesting on the smartboard or on a laptop. All sorts of ICTs like touchpads and so on, mobile devices. So that's just a very quick overview of some of the things in this week's two papers. So I think you'll find the papers are quite easy to read, and they are academic papers, but they're not sort of written at an inaccessible sort of a level. So what I've done is just go through some of the main findings in those papers and the key things that were discussed. So have a look at those papers and then make your post this week, and I think you'll find that some very interesting things in there that also tie in with what you'll be doing in your assessment piece, which is to do with visual literacy. So I'll leave it for there, and I'll be looking forward to responding to your posts, as will Aaron. Okay.